Welcome. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Superintendent Rashid, and you're probably joining us today because you're interested in pursuing a career in policing with the Calgary Police Service. Regrettably, and as you know, with the COVID pandemic and restrictions in and around social gatherings, we're not able to provide you the same interface as far as an information session goes, the recruiting section, where we could answer questions from prospective candidates looking for employment with the CPS. Today, we've got the next best thing. We're actually joined by our subject matter experts from the CPS recruiting unit, Constable Jonathan Crespo, Constable Andy Buck, who are going to answer some questions from you in and around the recruiting process. Also with us on the panel is Constable Tess Hare. Tess recently graduated from Class 229 from the Chief Crowfoot Learning Centre and currently works in District 1. And she's going to provide some anecdotal experience as to her journey through the recruiting process and her recent time on the street and patrol as well. Today's topic is about recruit training and opportunities with the CPS once you're successful in gaining employment with the organization. We're going to talk a little bit about what you can expect both during your time in classes and afterwards as well. So thanks to our panel for joining us today. Maybe we can start off a little bit by talking about what the classroom portion of recruit training looks like for our candidates.
So classroom portion, there's 28 weeks of training, paid training. There's a little bit of classroom, some computer-based learning, and some practical learning. You actually get your hands on the steering wheel, hands on the firearm, that kind of thing. And like I said, 28 weeks long, and then graduation following.
So it seems like getting our hands on anything in this day and age with the pandemic is kind of taboo. Tess, from your recent experience, how has COVID changed our recruit training?
So I got to experience classes pre-COVID and right in the middle of COVID. So pre-COVID, it was kind of a mix between classroom, hands-on, driver, firearm. It was just kind of progressive movement. When COVID hit, we did a lot of our classroom stuff right at the beginning, so it was kind of like textbook overload. We had to wait for restrictions to be put in place and all that sort of stuff to do any of the hands-on training. So towards the end of training, then that got piled on. So it was quite different rather than just having like a day of classroom, day of SCT, kind of going back and forth, to classroom all day, every day, into SCT all day, every day. When COVID hit, so we had certain restrictions. We had to have the same partner the whole time doing like our combat training. We had to wear masks the whole time. We had to sanitize everything. We had to keep our own fist suits, all that sort of stuff. So it definitely changed drastically between pre-COVID and when COVID hit.
Yeah, and I can tell you just from my own experience that the service did make application to the province and received some exemptions for certain types of training. So Tess is absolutely right, is that while we've had to remain adaptable and agile to our operating environment, the recruit training has continued throughout the pandemic. Andy, how many people do you typically see in a recruit class?
Yeah, a full recruit class would normally be 24 applicants.
And what kind of academic instruction can we expect in a recruit class?
Simply put, we're going to teach you everything that you need to know. From a criminal law perspective, bylaw, traffic law, all that sort of stuff. Everything you need to know.
Tess, any tips that you might give people in preparing for classes or from your experience regarding the academic side of it?
I think just taking one day at a time. We often use the reference getting fed by a fire hose, and that's pretty much what recruit classes is. So taking things, and for me, being out on the street for about 6 sets now, it's nice to take those things and put them into context, because when you're just getting told on a PowerPoint, it's kind of hard to put into motion. But just know that once you hit the streets, once you start to put kind of actions to words, it all starts to come together. That's
great, and we will talk a little bit in this segment about what the field training officer phase actually looks like. So that's a great segue into that. Among the academics, and Tess, you talked a little bit in the beginning about combat situations and subject control techniques, SCTs as well, but conflict resolution is a big part of the work that we do here in our learning center. Why do you think, Jonathan, conflict resolution is such an important part of our training for our recruits?
Conflict resolution is important because if you can get somebody to cooperate with you voluntarily, that's a lot more desirable than having to force somebody into custody, for example. And then that takes place in many different ways. Sometimes folks are upset about being pulled over, receiving a ticket. Some folks don't want to be arrested. Some folks are violent offenders. And if you can gain voluntary compliance in each one of those situations, much, much better. And I think where the jeopardy comes into play is you can get hurt and they can get hurt. If we can resolve the situation peacefully and without any injury, obviously more desirable.
Excellent. I want to change gears a little bit and talk about physical fitness standards. We've talked about the APREP, and having gone through the recruiting process, a candidate will have been successful in passing the physical standard to join the CPS. It's been referred to as kind of the minimum standard test. Perhaps from your anecdotal experience, how does fitness related to the APREP compare to what you're going to receive in classes?
Personally, I think like huge emphasis on it being a minimum standard. I mean, one of the testing components in fitness, we run the beep test, but there's no max. So in the APREP, it maxes out at 7. When you run it in classes, you go as far as you can, and then certain things like that, there's other components to testing where you get graded on, and then you get a score at the end of training. So it's always nice to have that bit of competitive edge with your classmates and whatnot. But even things like you have a full day of SET training, could range anywhere from 4 to 8 hours. So you're active that whole time. So if you're kind of looking at the APREP as like, like I can get in on that, it's probably not going to work out as well. So SET is subject control tactics. So it's basically anytime you get go hands-on at any point, whether it be handcuffing, takedowns, get in a physical fight. So we started out low. We started out kind of like kicking, striking, moved into handcuffing, moved into prone cuffing, moved into like multiple threats. So it just kind of building the foundation and then working up from that. So it's definitely like a very physical course. Same with, we have a stress test in firearms. So it was probably one of the most physical days we had in training. I think physical fitness, especially in circumstances like that, relate to mental fitness, because if you're like, hey, like I can get through another round, like you're mentally going to be more stable and make better decisions at the end of the day.
But what other kind of training would you recommend to people to get to enhance their fitness? Like what kinds of things did you do to stay competitive?
Personally, I don't look at it as strength, cardio, flexibility, like anything like that. I like kind of to combine them all, do a little bit of everything each day, do interval training. So you're doing something for 2 minutes, 1 minute rest, kind of doing that 5 to 8 rounds kind of thing. Just combining all those skills and not being afraid to kind of step outside of your box and do something different, even going out for a hike with like a weighted backpack, something like that, something that'll kind of increase your mental perseverance just to keep going and not stop just because you feel tired.
Yeah, you mentioned that mental perseverance, the mental health a couple of times. I too think it's important. And so you'd probably agree that practicing things like mindfulness or meditation would be equally as important?
100%. And I know the service has courses like that they offer, which is huge. I took them between being back class, and it definitely helps kind of an extra thing to have in your tool belt.
Excellent, thank you. And the SCT, the subject control techniques, is that when you get to learn about the other tools in your tool belt, like the baton and the CW and the OC spray?
Yeah, so exactly what they call it, tools in your tool belt. So you have a full day of baton training, full day of OC. Within the OC, you get taught how to use it, and you also get OC sprayed yourself, even taser as well. So you learn how to use a taser, you also get tased yourself. I think the biggest thing for me to take out of those two experiences was you had a goal at the end of it, whether or not it be kind of apprehending someone or just kind of getting your gun back out to the ready position. But you always have that task that you need to accomplish no matter kind of what the obstacle is. So just keeping that in mind and making sure that gets done despite whatever you have to come across.
Great advice. Andy, do you remember from your time being OC sprayed?
I do, not fondly, I have to admit. I'm sure that everybody that's been through it can attest. You think that you've got through the worst of it and you've managed to get your way home and jump in the shower, and then you get phase 2 all over again because it's all stuck in your eyebrow. So not a good experience, but it's invaluable because it teaches you that despite that discomfort, you can work through it.
And Jonathan, a slightly different experience, the taser or the CEW?
Exactly. With the taser, once the taser has been deactivated, it's over.
Right.
With the OC spray, exactly like what Andy's saying, you experience phase 2 once you get home later that day. So I think myself and most of my classmates, if we had to choose, we would have preferred the CEW.
But like Tess said earlier, I think we can all of us attest to is like being goal-oriented, knowing that you have a job to do and that you will persevere through it, and that experiential learning doesn't get much more real than that, right? So.
Yeah. And that thought that I can't do it gets pushed to the back because you realize that actually I can do this. Yeah,
absolutely. Great advice. Tess, tell us a little bit about firearms training. How was that experience for you?
Firearms training was great. For one, it was nice to get out of headquarters and just kind of do something out of the ordinary. So our firearms program is made out of 14 days, so you go up there for a full 14 days. And you start with the basics. It's dry drills, it's repetition after repetition. The instructors that we had up there are unreal. And then you slowly work into doing different drills with your handgun, and then you get into the shotgun, and then you have your stress test, you have your qualification shoots, all that sort of stuff. So it was an unreal program, and glad I got to take part in it.
Did you have any proficiency in firearms before you joined the CPS?
I had none whatsoever, so it's nice to get those reps in right off the bat and just feel comfortable with it.
Interestingly enough, I came to Calgary as a police officer from the UK, and in the UK, the officers there are not routinely armed, so it was a totally alien subject for me, something that I had to learn. Firearms were always something I was a little wary of because I had no experience of, but the reality is that as an organisation we teach you everything that you need to know, and in some respects you can argue that it's good not to have experience because then you have no bad habits to correct either.
I'll open the next question up to the panel, whoever wants to answer it, but what can a recruit expect as far as driver training goes once in classes?
There's some priority driving, some emergency driving with the lights on, some vehicle maneuverability, even just getting used to the specific police vehicle. Even if you've had your license for a while, you might not be driving. It might be a Crown Vic, it might be an Explorer or a van. Just getting used to the vehicle. And then some emergency defensive tactics, emergency braking, that kind of thing.
I found working in a district environment, Tess, you can probably relate to this too, is that a piece that's often overlooked in our preparedness for navigating our city, particularly if you're from outside, is understanding the quadrants of the city, some of the nomenclature and naming of the streets in Calgary, which is quite unique compared to other regions that we police. Did you find that being a challenge as well?
100%. I'm from a small town BC, and I got placed in downtown Calgary. So remembering that there's one-ways and such like that is definitely the challenge at times. But being on patrol, like our vehicle is our office. So just knowing kind of how that vehicle works, how to navigate it, all that sort of stuff.
What types of vehicles, Tess, did you get to learn and experience during driver training?
So we have vans, which are basically like a moving billboard.
Right.
We have the Tauruses, we have SUVs, and we have trucks. So each platform was definitely an adjustment and took different kind of capabilities to maneuver.
And of course, you overlay that with our ever-changing environment here in Calgary. You just never know what you're going to get, right?
Exactly.
So driver training is equally important. Thanks for sharing that. So the 28 weeks are packed full of some academic, some verbal skills, subject control techniques, as Tess said. It's an intense 28 weeks. I'm sure we can all agree to that. What happens, Jonathan, after you hit the streets? You get assigned to a district post-graduation. What does the process look like then for somebody graduating from classes?
So you graduate from classes and you get assigned to a district, and then you're assigned a patrol training officer. For 15 weeks, you'll be the new person on the street. Your first phase of that 15 weeks, you'll be assigned a training officer, and then you'll learn a lot more of the practical components that don't get covered in classes, and speaking to real folks in the public, real complainants, real witnesses, real suspects. Then you move on to the second phase of that PTO training phase. A lot of the components remain the same, except you're taking over a lot more. Your training officer will be hanging back a lot more and letting you find your own way, letting you experience everything for yourself.
Do you get the same training officer for both phases of the coach phase?
Good question. No, both phases is a different officer.
And as far as being assigned to a district, do you get to choose which district you go to?
I remember when I was in classes, I filled out a sheet and I gave my top 3 choices, which was districts 1, 3, and 7, and they sent me to 5. So they ask for your perspective, but I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's the needs of the service, and they put you where they need you.
Absolutely. No, that's a great perspective. Tess, how have you found your transition to patrol from classes?
It's been good. So I got placed in District 1, which is the downtown core of Calgary, and I wanted to be kind of thrown right into it, and that's exactly what I've gotten. It's interesting to work with different people and just kind of see different policing style. Getting used to the shift work, for me, it's a bit of a struggle to sleep past a certain time during the day. So adjusting to sleeping later or taking naps before shift. It all depends. Some of the night shifts start at 4 p.m., which aren't too bad. The ones that start later at around 7 p.m., those are definitely a bit of a grind toward the end of the shift.
What's been your number one surprise of patrol work, if there was one?
Number one surprise is definitely like the type of calls that we deal with, just the diversity of them. For my kind of main reason for joining the job was you go into work every day not knowing what you're going to face, and that's exactly what you get.
Absolutely, thank you for sharing. And so I know that Jonathan and Andy, you're both kind of seasoned members of the service. You've been around for a little while, which is great. What kind of opportunities can somebody look forward to after spending some time in patrol, and what kind of time frame are they looking at for transition to perhaps a specialty unit?
Yeah, well, as an organisation, we offer over 100 specialised posts. I would like to think that initially an applicant wants to be a frontline patrol officer. That's the draw that's enabled them to apply for position in the first place. But the reality is policing is more than just responding lights and sirens in a patrol car. Lots of other opportunities. So yeah, prior to working in recruiting, I was in the diversity resource team, where actually I was the LGBT liaison officer. It's a role that I had never previously thought about, but an opportunity came to join that team, and I did my research and was fortunate enough to get the position. And I've got to admit, in 27 years of policing, it was probably one of my most favourite roles. Extremely challenging, but something that I enjoyed immensely.
Excellent, that's great. What has been one of the highlights of your career thus far, Jonathan?
It'd be extremely difficult to pick just one. Like I mentioned in some of the other videos, I've worked on mountain bikes, I've worked in public safety unit, I worked with our detectives in our general investigations unit, I've written warrants, executed search warrants, the list goes on, and it's been so much fun. And especially like what Tess said, every day is different, you have no idea what's going to happen next. I love that variety, I find it exciting. That would be my favorite.
No, that's fair. I mean, you know, for me, I've had the opportunity to work in a number of different working environments as well. You know, of course, the outward-facing side of policing, the tactical and the mountain bike and the canine are the obvious ones, but there's also a lot of heavy lifting that goes on for some very brilliant people doing some fantastic work. You know, in areas like our digital forensics team, we have forensic accountants doing auditing and organized crime files. So really, it's a great opportunity and a great vocation to tie in your personal and your professional and your academic experience with some of the 100 or so opportunities that the CPS affords, and that's what really makes this place as rich and as magical as it truly is. Tess, how about you? We've heard some great stories from the panelists about their kind of niches and some of the exciting things they've done. Do you think you found yours yet, or where does your aspiration lie?
Well, I want to remain operational for quite some time. My dream job is canine,
Right.
so kind of setting up a 5-year plan as to kind of how to make that happen, but time will tell, but that is the dream, so we'll see what happens.
Excellent. Yeah, I really want to thank each of you for contributing your thoughts and your experience and your opinions today. I've come away richer for that opportunity of having that conversation with you, so thank you all. I hope too our viewers have found this to be a great segment on the recruit training process as well as the opportunities post-training. Please don't forget to check out our other video segments on the joincalgarypolice.ca website, and we thank you for watching.